My name is Marianne, 65 years old, and my journey of motherhood began when I adopted my daughter Cassandra at age 4. Being a corporate lawyer while raising her alone wasn't easy, but we managed. Recently, a financial catastrophe struck, or so she thought. When Cassandra believed I was broke, she cut ties completely. I chose silence over explanation. Within just 5 days, everything changed when my fortune returned. If you're watching this, let me know where you're tuning in from and subscribe. If you want more stories about the true meaning of family beyond wealth. I still remember the day my life changed forever. It was 1985 and I was 30 years old already, making waves as one of the few female corporate lawyers at a prestigious firm in Chicago. Back then, the glass ceiling wasn't just visible, it was reinforced with steel beams. Every morning, I'd stride into that towering office building in my shoulder-padded power suit briefcase in hand, determined to prove myself in a man's world. Children weren't part of my plan. I'd made that painful but pragmatic decision years earlier. My male colleagues with families had wives handling the home front. As a single woman, I knew having a child would derail the career I'd sacrificed everything to build. Then came the pro bono case that changed everything. Our firm occasionally represented a local orphanage in legal matters, and I was assigned to review some documentation. What was supposed to be a quick paper signing turned into a full tour of the facility. That's when I saw her. Cassandra. 4 years old, sitting alone in the corner of the playroom, her dark curls falling over her face as she concentrated on a puzzle. Something about her quiet determination spoke to me. "Who's that little girl?" I asked the administrator. The story broke my heart. Abandoned as an infant, Cassandra had bounced between 3 foster homes already. The last family had returned her after deciding to have a biological child instead. "She's very bright," the administrator told me, "but she's becoming withdrawn. Children need stability." When Cassandra looked up and our eyes met, something inside me shifted. I can't explain it even now. It wasn't a lightning bolt moment like in movies. It was quieter, deeper, a recognition. The adoption process wasn't easy, especially as a single career-focused woman. The social workers questioned everything from my long work hours to my lack of childcare experience, but I was nothing if not persistent. I rearranged my entire life, negotiated flexible hours, converted my home office into a bedroom filled with stuffed animals and books, and took parenting classes. 6 months later, Cassandra came home with me. Those first months tested us both. She had night terrors and clung to me one moment, then pushed me away the next. I was sleep-deprived, overwhelmed, and constantly second-guessing myself. There were nights I sat on my bathroom floor, crying, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Not for my sake, but for hers. Did she deserve someone who knew what they were doing? But slowly, we found our rhythm. I'll never forget the first time she called me Mom. Not because she was told to, but because she wanted to. It happened over breakfast, something so ordinary. She looked up from her cereal and said, "Mom, can I have more juice?" I nearly dropped the glass. That night, I made myself a promise I would provide Cassandra with the stability and security she deserved. From that day forward, I began meticulously planning our financial future. I opened investment accounts, started college funds, and took on additional clients to boost our savings. I wanted her to never worry about being abandoned again, emotionally or financially. The corporate law world was ruthlessly demanding, but it paid exceptionally well. While my colleagues spent their bonuses on vacation homes and luxury cars, I lived well below my means. My financial advisor thought I was overly cautious, but after what Cassandra had been through, I wanted ironclad security for her future. Those early years shaped us both. Cassandra gradually blossomed from that quiet, wary child into a girl who laughed more freely. And I, the once rigid career woman, learned to leave work at the office sometimes and build sandcastles at the beach instead. Little did I know that the financial safety net I was so carefully weaving would one day be tested in ways I never imagined, not by the market, but by the very person I was protecting. As Cassandra grew, so did my career and our financial stability. I developed a balanced parenting approach that accommodated my professional responsibilities while ensuring quality time with my daughter. Weekends were sacred. Museum visits, baking experiments, and reading adventures. On particularly busy work weeks, I'd surprise her with breakfast picnics before school, spreading a blanket on our living room floor at dawn. Money lessons started early. When Cassandra was 6, I gave her a transparent piggy bank with 3 compartments spending, saving, and giving. Her weekly allowance was small but consistent, teaching her to make choices. Money doesn't grow on trees, I'd tell her, but it does grow in smart places when you're patient. Cassandra was bright and artistic with a natural talent for music that became evident when she was 7. I enrolled her in piano lessons, and within 2 years, her teachers were suggesting advanced training. While she inherited none of my analytical tendencies, her emotional intelligence and creativity constantly amazed me. Her struggles came mainly in math and sciences subjects, where I'd arrange tutoring while assuring her that different strengths were valuable. Meanwhile, my career trajectory took an unexpected turn when I was offered partnership at 40. The timing aligned perfectly with a strategic pivot in my investment philosophy. Rather than safe, low-yield investments, I began diversifying into emerging markets and technology stocks that my more conservative colleagues considered risky. The risk paid off spectacularly. By Cassandra's 12th birthday, my portfolio had nearly doubled. When she turned 16, it had quadrupled. I kept these details private, even from her. I wanted Cassandra to develop her own work ethic without the knowledge of a substantial inheritance awaiting her. Our lifestyle did reflect some of our growing wealth. When Cassandra was 10, we moved from our modest townhouse to a spacious home in Lakeshore, one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods. The house featured a music room with perfect acoustics for her piano and enough bedrooms for guests. Education was my priority investment. Cassandra attended Westfield Academy, a private school known for its arts program and college placement success. Summer programs at Interlochen Arts Camp, language immersion trips to Europe, and enrichment activities filled her calendar. I wanted to give her every opportunity I'd worked for, but also instill appreciation for these privileges. Remember, I'd remind her, everything you have is a blessing to be grateful for, not an entitlement. For the most part, these lessons seemed to stick. Cassandra worked hard at school, and her music made good friends, and volunteered at the same orphanage where we first met. When she was accepted to Northwestern University for their music program, her excitement was matched by a mature recognition of the opportunity. "I know how lucky I am, Mom," she told me during move-in day. "Not everyone gets this chance." Those college years transformed our relationship. The daily mothering gave way to weekend visits and long phone calls. I remained heavily involved in her life, but encouraged independence. As her social circle expanded, I noticed subtle changes in her references and interests. Designer names appeared in her vocabulary, weekend trips with affluent friends became common, and her tastes grew increasingly sophisticated. I wasn't concerned initially. After all, she was growing up and finding herself. During her sophomore year, I finalized a trust fund that would give her access to significant assets when she turned 30, with smaller disbursements available after graduation. My financial advisors recommended the age restrictions to ensure maturity before full access. "You've done remarkably well, Marion," my longtime financial planner told me during our annual review. "Cassandra will be very well provided for, regardless of her own career path." That was always my intention, to provide security without removing the incentive to build her own success. What I couldn't have anticipated was how this financial foundation would shape not just Cassandra's future, but the very nature of our relationship in unexpected and painful ways. After graduating with honors from Northwestern, Cassandra landed an entry-level position at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's administrative office. The job aligned with her passion for music, but came with a modest salary that couldn't sustain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. "Mom, how did you afford all this when you were my age?" she asked one Sunday during brunch at her favorite upscale restaurant, a meal I was paying for. "I didn't," I explained. "I lived in a tiny apartment with a roommate, bought secondhand furniture, and ate a lot of pasta. Building wealth takes time, Cassandra." She nodded politely, but didn't seem to internalize the message. Instead of adapting her spending to her income, she began making subtle requests for loans to cover her credit card bills. The first few times I helped without comment, hoping it was just an adjustment period. By the 6th month, I gently suggested a budget counseling session. "I don't need financial advice, Mom," she said, slightly offended. "I just need to get through until my next promotion." I noticed her apartment featured new designer furniture she couldn't possibly afford. Her wardrobe expanded with luxury brands, and weekend getaways with friends became routine. When I expressed concern, she would reference future earnings or vague investment opportunities that would turn things around. The pattern was troubling, but I struggled to find the balance between supportive parent and enabler. Then Tyler entered the picture. They met at a charity gala I had purchased tickets for. Tyler Palmer worked in commercial real estate, was charming and articulate, and came from what he called good family, which I later discovered meant a family with an excellent reputation, but depleted finances. He was handsome with perfect teeth and expertly tailored suits that projected success. Cassandra was immediately smitten. Their relationship progressed rapidly. Within 6 months, they were discussing marriage. Tyler's career seemed promising on the surface. He drove a luxury car, wore expensive watches, and spoke confidently about major deals. But something felt off. When I asked specific questions about his business, the answers were vague. My lawyer's instinct for detecting half-truths pinged consistently. "He makes me happy, Mom," Cassandra said when I gently expressed concern. "Isn't that what matters?" Their engagement party at the Chicago Yacht Club, which I funded, was the first real glimpse into what was coming. Tyler's toast included a joke about marrying into success that drew awkward laughter. Later that evening, I overheard him telling a friend they were looking at homes in Gold Coast, one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. The wedding was extravagant beyond reason. Cassandra wanted a fairy tale celebration, and despite my suggestions for moderation, the event ballooned to include 300 guests, rare orchid centerpieces flown in from Hawaii, and a 10-piece orchestra. The final bill came to just over $200,000, which I paid without complaint. 3 months after the wedding, Cassandra and Tyler invited me to see the house they wanted to purchase. A 5-bedroom Victorian in Lincoln Park, priced well over $2 million. "It's perfect for starting a family," Cassandra said excitedly. "The mortgage broker just needs a co-signer." I expressed concern about the timing and suggested a starter home instead. Tyler smoothly interjected. "We've run the numbers, Marion. With your help on the down payment, we can make it work. Why settle when this is clearly the right house for Cassandra?" Against my better judgment, I contributed to the down payment and co-signed the mortgage. The alternative, disappointing my daughter and creating tension in her new marriage, seemed worse at the time. I justified it as an advance on her inheritance. When my grandchildren arrived, first Emma, then James 3 years later, my financial support expanded further. Private preschool tuition college funds, family vacations. I delighted in my role as grandmother and found it difficult to refuse requests for the children's benefit. The turning point came during Emma's 5th birthday party. I overheard Cassandra talking to another mother on the patio. "We're looking at summer homes in Lake Geneva," she said. "Mom's helping with that too. She's always been generous with her money. Not our family or her grandchildren, but her money." The phrasing stung. Later that night, when Tyler casually mentioned they were considering a boat purchase, I finally set a boundary. "I think it's time you two built your lifestyle based on your own income," I said gently. The silence that followed was telling. Cassandra looked shocked, then hurt. Tyler's smile tightened. "Of course, Marion," he said smoothly. "We wouldn't want to impose." But their behavior changed noticeably after that conversation. Visits became shorter and less frequent. Calls often centered around the children's needs or achievements. The underlying message became increasingly clear: my value in their lives was directly proportional to my financial contribution. It was a painful realization, but nothing compared to what was coming. In early 2022, the global markets experienced a significant downturn. Technology stocks, which formed a substantial portion of my portfolio, were hit particularly hard. While my overall financial position remained sound, a perfect storm of circumstances created a temporary cash flow challenge. Several major investments were tied up in projects with lock-in periods, limiting my immediate access to capital. I wasn't worried. At 65, I'd weathered market fluctuations before and had confidence in my diversified portfolio. This was a temporary situation that required some lifestyle adjustments while waiting for the market to stabilize. "It's just prudent money management," I explained to my financial advisor as we reviewed options. The simplest solution was to reduce expenses temporarily and liquidate non-essential assets. I decided to sell my Mercedes and purchased a practical Toyota instead. Several pieces of art and jewelry that held significant value but weren't family heirlooms went to auction. The most substantial change was housing. My 5-bedroom home in Lakeshore had become excessive since I lived alone, so I sold it and moved to a comfortable but modest 2-bedroom condo downtown. These changes made financial sense regardless of market conditions. I was entering a new phase of life where simplicity appealed more than space and maintenance. However, to an outside observer unfamiliar with investment strategies, these moves might appear as signs of financial distress. When I explained the situation to Cassandra over lunch, I kept it simple. "I'm making some adjustments while waiting for the market to recover. Nothing to worry about. Just streamlining at this stage of life." Her initial reaction seemed appropriately concerned. "Are you sure everything's okay, Mom? This sounds serious." I reassured her, explaining that my core investments remained solid and this was temporary. She nodded with apparent understanding, but I noticed her examining my new watch, a simple Tissot replacing my usual Cartier. The first subtle change came the following week. Our standing Sunday dinner was canceled due to Tyler's work emergency. The weekly calls with my grandchildren grew shorter. When we did meet, Cassandra would insist on paying for coffee or lunch with an exaggerated flourish. "My treat, Mom. You've done enough for us over the years." The statement might sound generous to an outsider, but her tone carried an uncomfortable implication that our relationship was entering a new phase where she would now take care of me. The role reversal might have been touching if it came from genuine care rather than a performative display following perceived financial changes. 3 weeks after my move, I stopped by Cassandra and Tyler's house unannounced to drop off a birthday gift for Emma. The front door was ajar as their housekeeper was bringing in groceries, so I let myself in, calling out a greeting. I heard Tyler's voice from the study. Her financial advisor basically confirmed it. "The market crash hit her hard," he was saying. "She's liquidating everything. Cassandra's freaking out about the inheritance." I froze in the hallway, not wanting to eavesdrop but unable to interrupt. "My mom's not broke," Cassandra protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Wake up, Cass. She sold her house, her car, even her jewelry. You said yourself she's wearing a $200 watch now. Your trust fund is probably gone. What about the kids' college funds? Her voice trembled. We need to legally separate our finances from hers before this gets worse. I'm not letting her money problems affect our children's future. I quietly placed Emma's gift on the entry table and left without announcing my presence. Driving home, I felt a strange numbness. The conversation revealed more than just concern about inheritance. It exposed the true nature of my relationship with my daughter. The unconditional love I thought we shared had limits, and those limits were defined by dollar signs. That night alone in my new condo, I made a decision. I would not correct their assumptions. If Cassandra believed I was financially ruined, and that affected how she treated me, perhaps I needed to know that truth, painful as it was. Over the next few weeks, I watched as visits became even more infrequent. Cassandra's calls focused increasingly on checking if I was managing okay, in a tone one might use with an elderly person in decline. What hurt most was how my grandchildren were gradually kept at a distance, as though financial hardship was somehow contagious. My financial advisor called with positive news about my investments beginning to recover, but I kept this information to myself. The test had already revealed what I needed to know, and the results were heartbreaking. The formal dinner invitation arrived by text on a Tuesday. Mom, Tyler, and I would like to have you over Thursday evening, just adults. We need to discuss some important matters. The tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a social invitation, but a business meeting. I accepted with a brief, looking forward to it, and spent the next 2 days preparing myself emotionally for what was coming. Thursday evening, I arrived at their Lincoln Park home precisely on time. The setting felt staged. Good china on the dining table, classical music playing softly, and Cassandra unusually formal in her greeting. Tyler had arranged wine glasses and opened an expensive bottle, one I had gifted them on their anniversary. Dinner conversation remained superficial. We discussed the children's school achievements and neighborhood developments while avoiding any mention of finances. Only after dessert was served did Tyler clear his throat and transition to the real purpose of the evening. Marion, Cassandra, and I have been concerned about your situation, he began, his voice carrying the practiced sympathy of a real estate agent delivering bad news about a property value. My situation. I kept my expression neutral. Cassandra reached for my hand across the table. Mom, we know things have been difficult since the market downturn. Your investments, the house, everything. We want you to know we're here for you, Tyler continued smoothly. We've been discussing options that might make things easier for everyone. What followed was a carefully rehearsed presentation about a lovely retirement community they had researched. According to Tyler, it offered financial assistance options and would provide me with appropriate care while protecting the family's remaining assets. I listened silently as they outlined their plan. The subtext was clear. They wanted me in a controlled environment where my imagined financial problems wouldn't impact them. We've also been consulting with our attorney, Cassandra added, not quite meeting my eyes. Given the circumstances, we think it's wise to legally separate our finances, just as a precaution. A precaution against what? I asked quietly. Tyler jumped in. Creditors' potential healthcare costs, tax implications. At your age, these considerations become important. At my age, I repeated. Cassandra squeezed my hand. Mom, please understand, we have Emma and James to consider. Their future, their education. We can't risk their security. The irony was painful. The education funds for both grandchildren were already established in irrevocable trusts. Cassandra knew this, or should have. The fact that she didn't ask about these arrangements revealed how little she understood about my financial planning, despite years of attempted lessons. And what about our relationship? Does that get legally separated too? I asked. Don't be dramatic, Mom, Cassandra said with a nervous laugh. This is just about paperwork. Nothing changes between us. But everything already had. The meeting with attorneys the following week was clinical. Cassandra had engaged a firm specializing in elder law, another telling choice. Documents were presented that would effectively remove me as co-signatory on any shared assets, terminate my role in the grandchildren's education trusts, and establish clear boundaries between their finances and mine. Throughout the process, I remained largely silent. My own attorney, whom I'd brought along occasionally, whispered questions about the necessity of certain provisions. I simply nodded for him to let it proceed. Cassandra misinterpreted my quiet compliance as defeat, or perhaps confusion. It's for the best, Mom, she said, as we signed the final papers. This protects everyone. What she meant was that it protected them from me, from the financial ruin they assumed I was facing. Not once during this process did she ask detailed questions about my actual financial status. The daughter I had raised, who had once been so perceptive about people's feelings, was now blind to everything except the perceived threat to her inheritance. As we left the attorney's office, Cassandra gave me a brief, formal hug. "We'll figure out the grandchildren's visits once you're settled in your new place," she said, already creating distance. That night alone in my condo, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not for the money, which was largely intact and recovering, but for the relationship that had revealed itself to be conditional. The tears were for the little girl I'd once brought home for the bedtime stories and piano recitals, for the graduation ceremonies and wedding toast I'd given. All those moments I'd treasured were now colored by the question, had it all been about the financial security I provided? I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window overlooking the city lights. Part of me wanted to call Cassandra immediately to reveal the truth about my finances and confront her behavior, but a deeper wisdom prevailed. Some lessons need time to unfold, and some truths need to be discovered rather than told. Little did I know that the market was about to deliver that lesson faster than I anticipated. 5 days after signing those papers in the attorney's office, my phone rang at 7:30 in the morning. It was Howard, my financial advisor of 20 years. "Marion, are you sitting down? The tech sector rebounded overnight. That Singapore fund we were worried about, they just announced a major acquisition that triggered the release of all restricted shares. Your portfolio hasn't just recovered, it's up 17% from pre-crash values." I sat at my kitchen counter, still in my robe, listening, as Howard detailed the remarkable turnaround. A combination of market correction, strategic positions in emerging technologies, and exceptional timing had created what he called a perfect recovery storm. "We should meet to discuss next steps," he continued. "With this liquidity, you could repurchase your house if you wanted to. Actually, there's a better property that just listed in Lakeshore that would be perfect for you." The irony wasn't lost on me. Less than a week after my daughter had legally distanced herself from my perceived financial ruin, my wealth had not only returned, but grown. The universe, it seemed, had a pointed sense of timing. "Let's meet this afternoon," I told Howard. "And yes, I'd like to see that property." The house Howard showed me was indeed perfect. A stunning 4-bedroom home with a garden that overlooked the lake. It featured a separate guest house that could serve as a music studio, and the kitchen opened to a terrace ideal for family gatherings that now seemed unlikely to occur. "It's substantially more than your previous home," Howard cautioned, "but well within your means, especially now." I made an offer that day above asking price with a request for expedited closing. Sometimes, decisive action is the best response to pain. The next morning, I met with Patricia Winters, my attorney for over 15 years. Unlike the elder law specialist Cassandra had engaged, Patricia knew my financial situation intimately and had helped structure my estate planning from the beginning. I want to make some changes, I explained. Substantial ones. Over the next 3 hours, we restructured my entire estate plan. The trust that would have provided generational wealth to Cassandra was dissolved. In its place, we established the Marion Foster Foundation for Children in Transition, which would receive 90% of my estate. The foundation would support children in foster care and help fund adoptions for older children like Cassandra had been. "Are you certain about this, Marion?" Patricia asked. "This is a significant change from your previous plans." "I've never been more certain, Pam," I replied, "but I do want to make provisions for my grandchildren." We created modest educational trusts for Emma and James that would cover college expenses, but not extend to the lavish lifestyle their parents envisioned. These trusts would be managed by an independent trustee, not Cassandra or Tyler. "What about Cassandra herself?" Patricia asked carefully. I considered this question deeply. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to leave her nothing. "A small trust, I decided. Enough to provide security if she ever truly needs it, but not enough to maintain her current lifestyle. And Patricia, I want all these changes kept completely confidential." That evening I was having dinner with 2 colleagues from my law firm, Days at Le Colonial, an upscale Vietnamese restaurant downtown. We were celebrating Margaret's retirement when I saw Cassandra enter with 2 friends. She didn't notice me immediately seated in a corner banquette. I watched as she laughed and ordered champagne, showing no signs of the concern she'd expressed about my well-being just days earlier. When she finally spotted me, the shock on her face was undisguised. Her eyes darted from my dining companions to my outfit, a designer dress I'd recently purchased, to the bottle of fine wine on our table. I smiled and raised my glass in her direction. After a moment of visible confusion, she excused herself from her table and approached. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Her voice carried forced cheerfulness, tinged with disbelief. "Celebrating Margaret's retirement," I replied calmly. "You remember Margaret from the firm?" Cassandra barely acknowledged my friends. "This place is rather expensive," she said in a lowered voice that still managed to sound concerned rather than accusatory. "Is it I hadn't noticed?" I replied. "Enjoy your evening, dear." As she walked back to her table visibly flustered, my phone buzzed with a text from my real estate agent. "Offer accepted. We close next week." Perfect timing indeed. Over the next few days, Cassandra called repeatedly. Each message expressed increasing concern that barely masked her confusion. "Mom, we need to talk. I'm worried about you. Are you making rash decisions?" I didn't answer these calls. Instead, I focused on planning my move to the new house and scheduling meetings with potential directors for my new foundation. The work felt purposeful healing in a way I hadn't anticipated. On the day I received the keys to my new home, another call came from Cassandra. This time, her voice message contained no pretense of concern. "Mom, I know you're avoiding me. I drove by your condo and saw you loading moving boxes into a Range Rover. A new Range Rover. What is going on? Call me back immediately." I texted back a simple address and time, 4 p.m. tomorrow if you'd like to talk. The address, of course, was my new home. At precisely 3:58 p.m., Cassandra's BMW pulled into the circular driveway of my new lakefront home. I watched from the living room window as she sat in her car for several moments, staring at the house with a mixture of confusion and what appeared to be anger. Finally, she approached the front door and rang the bell. I opened the door myself, foregoing the formal announcement system the previous owners had installed. Cassandra stood there in a carefully casual outfit that I recognized as her strategy for important confrontations. Expensive jeans, silk blouse, minimal but perfect makeup. "Hello, Cassandra. Please come in." I stepped aside, maintaining a composure developed through decades of high-stakes negotiations. She entered slowly, her eyes scanning the marble foyer with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier. The moving company had worked efficiently. Most rooms were already furnished with a mixture of pieces from my previous home and new acquisitions. "What is this?" she finally asked, her voice unnaturally high. "Whose house is this?" "Mine," I replied simply. "Would you like some tea or perhaps something stronger? This conversation might warrant it." I led her to the living room overlooking Lake Michigan. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured the late afternoon light reflecting off the water. A seating area with comfortable sofas faced both the view and the limestone fireplace, where a small fire took the chill from the spring air. Cassandra remained standing. "I don't understand. Last week you were selling everything. Tyler said your financial advisor confirmed you were in trouble. We signed those papers because you were facing bankruptcy." I poured myself a small glass of scotch and sat in one of the armchairs. Did I ever say I was facing bankruptcy? Did I ever ask you or Tyler for financial assistance? You sold your house, your car, you were wearing a cheap watch. The accusations tumbled out as though these were crimes I had committed against her rather than personal choices. "I sold a house that was too large for one person and bought a car better suited to my needs," I explained calmly. "As for the watch, I quite like it. The Cartier was insured, but felt unnecessary. But the market crash. Your investments recovered remarkably well. In fact, they've outperformed expectations." I took a sip of scotch. "Though I'm curious why my financial situation concerns you so deeply, now when just last week you took legal steps to separate yourself from it entirely." Her face flushed. "That wasn't... We were trying to protect you too. Elder law specialists recommended those steps for everyone's security." "Elder law," I repeated. "For a 65-year-old former corporate attorney in perfect health with an unimpaired mind. How thoughtful." Cassandra finally sat down, perching on the edge of the sofa. "Why didn't you tell us the truth?" "Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly. "Would knowing I was still wealthy have changed your decision to limit my access to my grandchildren? Would it have prevented those papers you were so eager to have signed?" "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "No, it wasn't fair." I agreed. "None of it was fair. Not your assumption that I would mismanage the wealth I spent a lifetime building. Not your decision to distance yourself when you thought I had nothing material to offer. Not the way you discussed my supposed financial ruin with Tyler while I stood in your hallway." Her eyes widened. "You heard that you were spying on us?" "I was bringing Emma a birthday gift," I corrected her. "Your door was open. But that's beside the point. The point is that I learned something valuable from this experience, Cassandra. I learned the true nature of our relationship." Tears welled in her eyes. Genuine tears, the first authentic emotion I'd seen from her in weeks. "Mom, you're twisting everything. We were concerned about you." "Were you? Then why didn't you offer to help? Why wasn't your first response to invite me to live with you if needed? Why did you immediately think about protecting assets rather than supporting family?" She had no answer for these questions. Instead, she switched tactics, a negotiation strategy I recognized from having taught her myself years ago. When direct defense fails, redirect. "So this was all a test. You deliberately misled us to what? Prove some point about loyalty." Her voice hardened. "That's manipulative and cruel." "I never lied to you, Cassandra. I said I was making adjustments while waiting for the market to recover. That was entirely true. You and Tyler made assumptions and acted on them without ever asking me directly about my financial status." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of truth settling between us. Finally, Cassandra spoke in a softer voice. "What happens now? With us, with the children?" This was the question I had been considering most deeply over the past week. Despite everything, Emma and James were innocent in this situation, and my love for them remained unchanged. I'll always be your mother, Cassandra. That doesn't change. But our relationship needs to be based on something more meaningful than financial expectations. I set down my glass. As for Emma and James, I'd like to maintain my relationship with them directly. I've established educational trusts that will ensure their college expenses are covered. And the inheritance? She asked the question, revealing where her thoughts truly remained. I've made changes to my estate plan, I said simply. Most of my wealth will go to a foundation supporting children in foster care and adoption services. Children like you once were. The implications sank in slowly. I watched as Cassandra processed what this meant. The anticipated generational wealth she and Tyler had counted on was redirected. The lifestyle they had built on expectations rather than earnings was suddenly on shaky ground. "You can't do that," she whispered. "I already have," I replied, "and it feels right. The money will help children who truly need it rather than funding luxury cars and vacation homes." Cassandra stood abruptly, tears now streaming freely. "This isn't about the money. It's about family loyalty." "Exactly," I said quietly. "It has always been about family loyalty. I'm glad we finally agree." She left without another word, the sound of her car engine revving aggressively as she departed. I remained by the window, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear over the lake. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, a cauterization of a wound that needed cleaning before any healing could begin. Later that evening, I called the administrator at the foundation I was establishing. We had our first foster child support event scheduled for the following month. It was time to focus on building something meaningful from this painful lesson, just as I had done 35 years ago when I first met a quiet little girl with dark curls working on a puzzle in the corner of an orphanage playroom. The weeks following my confrontation with Cassandra were painfully quiet. No calls, no texts, not even messages about the grandchildren. I respected the silence, understanding that significant revelations require processing time. Instead of dwelling on the rupture, I channeled my energy into establishing the Marion Foster Foundation. My new foundation offices opened in downtown Chicago with a small but dedicated staff of professionals experienced in foster care and adoption services. We developed 3 core programs: financial support for families adopting older children, educational scholarships for foster children aging out of the system, and training programs for prospective adoptive parents of trauma-affected children. "This foundation fills a critical gap," said Dr. Hernandez, our child psychology consultant. "Everyone wants to adopt babies. The children who truly need advocates are the older ones with complex backgrounds." Children like Cassandra had been. The irony wasn't lost on me. My greatest disappointment was funding my greatest purpose. 2 months after our confrontation, I received a text message with a photo of Emma losing her first tooth. No accompanying message, just the image. It was Cassandra's tentative olive branch. I responded with congratulations and a question about whether the tooth fairy had visited. The exchange was brief, but opened a narrow channel of communication. Gradually, carefully, I began rebuilding a relationship with my grandchildren directly. I invited them to specific activities: a children's concert at the Symphony for Emma, who shared her mother's musical talents, and dinosaur exhibits at the Field Museum for James, who at 4 was obsessed with paleontology. Cassandra would drop them off, our interactions formal but civil. Sometimes Tyler came instead, his manner notably more contrite than my daughter's. I suspected financial reality was hitting their household as my regular contributions had ceased entirely. "The children miss you," Tyler mentioned during one drop-off, his designer watch noticeably absent. "The house feels different without your visits." I simply nodded. His sudden appreciation for family bonds now that the financial tap was turned off felt too calculated to acknowledge directly. My most meaningful healing came through the Foundation's work. 6 months after its establishment, we helped finalize the adoption of 8-year-old Lily, who had been in foster care since age 3. Her new parents, both teachers, had wanted to adopt for years, but couldn't afford the legal and administrative fees. "We would have lost her to the system without your help," Lily's new mother told me at the adoption finalization party. "Now she has a forever home." Watching Lily's cautious smile bloom as she realized the permanence of her new situation brought me back 30 years to Cassandra's similar moment of understanding. Children are remarkably resilient when given stability and love. They can overcome tremendous adversity with the right support. Nearly a year after our confrontation, Cassandra called on a Sunday evening. Her voice sounded different, less polished, more authentic. "Mom, could we have coffee this week? Just us." We met at a small cafe midway between our homes. Cassandra arrived without her usual perfect appearance. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, her clothes casual, her face free of makeup. She looked younger, more like the daughter I remembered. "Tyler and I are separating," she said after the preliminaries. "It's been coming for months, but we're finally acknowledging it." I listened as she explained the cascade of realizations that followed our confrontation. Without the prospect of a significant inheritance, Tyler's interest in their marriage had waned. Financial pressures revealed fundamental differences in values. Arguments about spending and priorities became constant. "He wanted me to contest your new estate plan," she admitted. "Find ways to challenge the foundation legally. That's when I realized what he really wanted from our marriage." "And what do you want, Cassandra?" I asked quietly. She looked out the window for a long moment. "I want to be someone my children can respect, someone who stands on her own accomplishments." She turned back to me. "I've applied to graduate school for music education. Its practical builds on my background, and I can support us on a teacher's salary if I need to." For the first time in our difficult year, I felt a glimmer of the daughter I had raised. Not the entitled adult who had emerged, but the resilient child who had overcome abandonment once before. "The foundation you created," she continued hesitantly, "it helps children like I was." "Yes. I'd like to understand it better, maybe even help somehow. Not for financial reasons," she added quickly, "but because I should have appreciated what you did for me all those years ago. Other children deserve that chance too." It was a small step, an uncertain one, but genuine. The foundation had a volunteer program where recovering addicts shared their stories with foster children. Perhaps there was a place for former foster children to share their success stories too. We didn't reconcile completely that day. True healing would require more than one conversation. But we began building something new, a relationship based on shared values rather than financial dependence. It would take time boundaries and consistent effort from both of us. Last week, Emma had her school recital. She played the piano with the same serious concentration Cassandra once had. Afterwards, both Cassandra and I attended the celebrations dinner, sitting at the same table, finding moments of genuine connection amid the new family structure we were creating. On the drive home, I reflected on the painful journey of the past year. The daughter I adopted had indeed cut ties when she thought I was broke. My fortune had returned in 5 days, but the true wealth I'd regained was wisdom, about family, about conditional relationships, and about creating meaning from pain. The foundation now supports dozens of adoptions annually. Each one represents a child finding permanence, stability, and love. Their futures are unwritten, their potential unlimited. Some may disappoint those who love them most, as all humans sometimes do. But they'll have the foundation of security that gives them the chance to learn, grow, and perhaps find their way back to what matters. That's the most valuable inheritance anyone can offer. Not money, but the opportunity to discover one's authentic self, and purpose. What about you? Have you ever discovered someone's true feelings about you during a time of perceived hardship? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need a reminder about what truly constitutes family. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes our greatest pain can lead to our most meaningful purpose.